It's been said that Bigfoot exhibits nocturnal behavior, perhaps to hunt or to avoid detection. But the cloak of darkness couldn't hide the creature in the stunning footage you're about to see, captured by two campers armed with a night vision camera. It's May 2012 near the town of Quincy, Florida. Retired Army Ranger Stacy Brown Sr., now deceased, and his filmmaker son, Stacy Brown Jr., are camping in Torrey State Park on a search for the elusive Bigfoot. They start hearing some noises, so they pull out their FLIR thermal camera and head off down a trail.
We would hear something running on our right, and then we would hear something running on our left, and it stopped real quick. And then Dad looked up at the, up there at the tree, and he's like, oh, I see something.
The thermal camera is rolling as Stacy Sr. notices a little black object sticking out of one side of a tree.
Then it takes off and crosses this gap, and he goes into full-blown panic mode. The camera goes dead. He's like, we gotta go, we gotta go. He's like, do you got your gun?
Back at their truck, Stacy Jr. gets a first peek at this eye-popping footage, and this money shot that looks just like the iconic look-back frame of Patty from the famous Patterson-Gimlin film, which claimed to capture Bigfoot strolling alongside a Northern California creek in 1967.
I knew exactly what we had on camera. It was proof to me and my dad, because who on a Tuesday night is a mile and a half into the woods running around with no flashlight?
Noted Bigfoot investigator Steve Cole says he's not surprised by the area where this footage was captured.
In Florida, they have something called the skunk ape, and there's been a lot of sightings over many years of what they describe as a Bigfoot type of creature. What they call that is the skunk ape, partly because it smells skunky. But for all intents and purposes, it's the same thing as a Bigfoot. It's not quite as big or robust as the ones in, say, the Pacific Northwest, but that is kind of expected due to the climate being a lot more tropical.
These swamp sightings go back to the native tribes. The Seminoles and the Muskogee called the creature Esti Jabjaki, or Tall Man, and claimed he was the protector of the forest. So could this be what the Browns encountered? We turn to our experts for answers. We first ask the most obvious question. Could this just be a person?
It was shot with a thermal imager, and so it's picking up the heat signature. Typically, if any clothing is being worn, it masks the intensity of the heat emanating from those covered parts of the body. Honestly, don't see any of that. It's just a pretty uniform signature that would suggest a body a la natural.
But why would a person be walking around nude in the woods? Wildlife biologist Stephanie Manka instead notes the way the figure moves seems more like a different animal that doesn't wear clothes.
It looks to be like a large primate, but it doesn't seem to match the body structure of the living apes, of chimpanzees or gorillas being the most prominent ones. It seems like its legs are too long, and when gorillas walk on their hind legs, they're not hunched over like that, they're more upright.
Some have theorized that gorillas or large chimps could have escaped from one of the private zoos that have littered Florida over decades. But anthropologist Kathy Strain says neither this creature's morphology nor its gait support that theory.
The way it comes out of the trees is what we call a Groucho walk. It's very typical of what witnesses say Bigfoot walks like. You can see it on the Patterson-Gimlin film. You can see it in other examples where it's this strangely bent knee gait. It seems to be out of human proportions in the sense that you can't see a neck. It has very beefy looking arms. It has interesting legs that seem shorter than what you would see in humans.
Whatever this was pretty big, in excess of 6.5, 7 feet in height perhaps, and quite bulky. It appears very substantial. That is, the arms and the legs are not spindly. They appear to be thick and muscular.
Or could this all just be a hoax?
In order to have this video be credible, I would expect to see a lot more thermal imagery through the trees. I wouldn't expect it to just completely disappear.
Stacy Brown Jr. claims the reason the clip ends is because the camera stopped working. So what does Meldrum think?
I know Stacy. actually, personally, and have visited with him. I have no reason to suspect that he contrived this. And so the only other question would be, is anyone foolish enough to traipse around buck naked in the dark?
Our verdict? Unknown creature. Given that this footage was filmed at night with an early generation thermal imaging camera, we don't quite have enough information to reach a definitive answer. But whether this was indeed the Florida skunk ape or merely a subspecies of Florida man with a proclivity for nocturnal nudism, we can say this: the situation definitely warrants further investigation. It's April 2009, and Chuck Newton has taken his young son into the Appalachian Mountains of Virginia to have some fun with the family's ATV. Chuck barrels over rocks in the ravine, showing off for his young son, when suddenly something strange appears, a hairy humanoid crossing their path nonchalantly. Chuck stops cold in his tracks.
What was that?
It's a wide shot, so let's push in and slow down so you can get a better look. We see that it's a bipedal figure that appears to be very large from this perspective, possibly exceeding 7 feet in height.
What was that?
Field researcher Cliff Barrickman says Bigfoot sightings in this area go all the way back to Native Americans.
In Virginia, the Cherokee people had stories of giant hair-covered people-like things in the woods that were doing the same sort of things as the people of the Pacific Northwest described. The most reasonable explanation for these different people describing the same animals is that they were describing the same animals. Sasquatches have a continent-wide distribution.
During the turn of the 20th century, local newspapers in the area reported on strange Sasquatch encounters.
An old newspaper report from 1892 reports a large upright being with thick hair covering its head and shoulders, but the word Sasquatch didn't exist then. They chose to call it the wood booger.
The wood booger was rumored to be a horrifying sight that was known to carry away small children who wandered off in the night.
And booger, or wood booger, actually shares some of the same word roots as boogeyman and are used in much of the same way. A lot of times people would say, now you don't go out in the woods at night because the booger will get you.
Although this video has its fair share of skeptics, Barrickman thinks this could be real.
I find Chuck's reaction to be very natural, unstaged. When he turns and looks at the camera and points, did you see that? And then he immediately looks back and watches the animal as it walks away. I find that many times hoaxers focus on the camera itself instead of at this amazing thing that they just saw that was unexpected right in front of them. I've had the opportunity to go to this location with the witness, Chuck, and I found him to be very believable.
Interesting fact, Sasquatch sightings gained momentum in the American South right after the Civil War. One theory is that Confederate soldiers who refused to surrender and hid out in the woods were being mistaken for these hairy creatures. Of course, that doesn't explain the older Native American legends. Let's see what our experts have to say.
The creature that we're seeing in this video is clearly bipedal. The only other animal in this area that would be able to walk bipedally would be a bear walking on its hind legs. But when they do, they typically waddle more and take shorter steps. This being is clearly taking larger steps than a black bear would.
So if it's not a bear, could we be looking at a real-life Bigfoot? Biologist Floyd Hayes isn't so sure.
I'm just a little astonished to see that it's just casually crossing the stream. Doesn't seem to be the least bit concerned about this loud, noisy vehicle that's approaching it. I think this is either a human being in an ape-like costume that's crossing the river, or it is a fabricated video.
Anatomy professor Dr. Jeff Meldrum disagrees. He finds that this behavior could be perfectly acceptable for a Sasquatch.
The two most common circumstances under which encounters occur are on roads or near water. And so here we have the latter, and even an ATV trudging up that creek bed might not have sounded as intrusive or intimidating as it would otherwise, given the muffling effect of the white noise of the stream. The witness interaction with the videographer is also very spontaneous, very natural, very convincing.
What was that?
And as for this being a man in a suit, Meldrum is doubtful, but is hesitant to make the call without evidence of the actual scale of this creature.
I would probably put it at no more than 7 feet. All these off-the-shelf costumes are made for average people, but they're not made for a 7 or 8 foot tall person. So if we could establish larger size, that would certainly lessen the chances of it being someone donning a costume.
Our verdict, an unknown mammal. Our experts are stumped, and honestly, I am too. If this is not a hoax, it's nice to know that some Sasquatches seem pretty content to mind their own business when humans disturb them. This story begins all the way back in 1991 in the Blue Mountains of Washington State, just north of Mill Creek. Former U.S. Forest Patrolman and Bigfoot investigator Paul Freeman has come here with a colleague looking for evidence of Bigfoot.
Sure enough, what they found were hundreds of tracks of a Sasquatch.
Freeman measures the prints and makes these plaster casts. He's convinced this area is a Bigfoot hotspot, and over the years, the evidence just keeps piling up. 1992, in the neighboring Deduct Spring area of the Blue Mountains, Freeman shoots this video showing what he claims is a Bigfoot ambling through the woods. The creature allegedly left more prints, like this. And 4 years later, even more prints found in the moist ground in the nearby 5 Points area. Look closer. These whoppers are 14 inches long. If they're real, whatever left them is big, really big.
Many of these footprints penetrate into the ground quite deeply. And this photograph right here, you can see right there, the mid-tarsal pressure ridge.
Check it out. According to Barrickman, this mid-tarsal pressure ridge is one of the key differences between human and Sasquatch anatomy.
Behind the metatarsals is a big jumble of bone right beneath the ankle. But that jumble of bones in human beings, it doesn't bend at all because we have an arch that holds our foot stiff. But Sasquatches can actually bend their foot to some degree at that location. It is called the mid-tarsal joint.
Of course, some have claimed this was all one big hoax perpetrated by Freeman, but Barrickman says we know what faked prints look like. You can see when we compare Freeman's to a known fake made with a wooden prosthetic. It sure looks like there's a difference.
Upon push-off, sometimes a mound of dirt is raised up behind the metatarsals. This was not possible with a fake wooden prosthetic.
The idea of the mid-tarsal break was actually developed by our very own Bigfoot expert, Jeff Meldrum. Meldrum's hypothesis has been, no pun intended, a major step in the investigative research of Sasquatches. Let's see what our experts have to say about these particular prints. Anthropologist Kathy Strain explains there's always been some skepticism when it comes to the findings of Paul Freeman.
A lot of people said he found so much evidence. He was outside all the time, and he found prints here, and he found prints there. And he has that well-known video that there's just no way that he could be authentic.
We know Professor Meldrum believes in Bigfoot, but he's also on the lookout for any potential hoaxes. That's why Meldrum decided to drop in unexpectedly on Freeman to verify his evidence firsthand.
I was a bit incredulous, but I thought, what have I got to lose?
Then he saw the latest 5 Points tracks up close. Meldrum quickly concluded they couldn't be prints from some local animal.
And the most likely candidate out there is the bear. The bear isn't completely flat-footed. Its heel does not entirely rest on the ground. The heel of a bear has a very pointed in appearance as opposed to the very rounded, full heel pad of the Sasquatch foot.
But the real aha moment was, you guessed it, evidence of that same mid-tarsal ridge ruling out prints made by any human foot.
The heel is elevated, this retaining that midfoot flexibility, the advantage of a very flexible grasping foot for climbing up into trees. Another one that jumped out is this track from Mill Creek in 1991, separated by a considerable number of years, and yet showing this exact proportions, the orientation.
Now, to quote Lewis Carroll, it gets even curiouser. Since all of these prints show evidence of the mid-tarsal ridge and are the same size, Meldrum and Cliff Barrickman not only believed that these prints are real, but that they could be coming from the same individual specimen of Bigfoot.
This particular animal's footprints have been found on a number of occasions. In 1991, 1992, 96.
There were remarkable similarities that suggested these could in fact be the same individual.
And get this, based on research, Meldrum thinks Sasquatches can live to be about 30 to 50 years old. So this specimen could very well be at least 15 to 25 years of age.
This evidence demonstrates the existence of an unrecognized species.
Our verdict? Potential primate print. We're sure these prints don't come from a bear. They sure look different from known fakes. And that mid-tarsal ridge appears to eliminate the human foot too. If they're real, they could be valuable evidence in proving Bigfoot's existence. It's January 2022, and Boyd Sims, a Proof is Out There viewer, is on a month-long expedition 50 miles north of Houston, Texas, in the Sam Houston National Forest. He is there to record wildlife sounds, and what he discovers is music to his ears.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was shocked. I was in shock.
Boyd has made dozens of strange recordings of what he describes as Bigfoot calls.
I spent years looking for explanations of the audio recordings I have and can't find any animal that makes any of the sounds that I have recorded. Sasquatch is definitely here in Texas.
This area of the country has a ton of Bigfoot reports out of it, dating back into the 1800s. I have personally spoken to a dozen or two people that have seen Sasquatches in this area. One fisherman found footprints. They were about 13 inches.
In fact, there are more than 40 Sasquatch reports a year inside the Sam Houston National Forest.
That's a pretty significant number of people that have seen Sasquatches in this area.
Boyd's recordings are hardly the first time an alleged Bigfoot sound was captured. Made in the early 1970s, the Sierra sound recordings are touted as the gold standard of evidence for Bigfoot language. According to one respected linguist, these sounds captured in California's Sierra Nevada mountains reveal an actual intelligent conversation in an, as of yet, undocumented language. Could we be hearing more evidence of Bigfoot talking in Boyd's recordings? We'll let our expert sound off.
The whoops may be the means by which males and females of this relatively solitary, widely dispersed, very rare species find a mate. These loud calls are probably territorial. By comparison, large male orangutans broadcast their territory by a loud, raucous call that booms out through the jungle. They've even developed extensive laryngeal air sacs that act as almost like amplifiers. And so it stands to reason that perhaps Sasquatch have these same air sacs.
Meldrum suggests that these air sacs may also enable Sasquatches to produce infrasound, a low-frequency sound used by animals such as elephants and whales. These sounds allow animals to communicate at great distances and can even affect the physiology of the listener.
It can cause the stimulation of receptors in the brain that will evoke fear and trepidation, as well as other emotions. I've talked to witnesses who said, that their very core vibrated from the intensity and the pitch of these sounds.
Could Sasquatches possibly be using infrasound to keep people away as a desperate effort to keep their dwindling species alive? We checked in with forensic audio analyst Dr. Robert Maher, who first compares the recording to known animals found in the area, starting with the wild boar.
It's making a kind of a chirpy kind of sound rather than a long howl like the Sam Houston recording.
If it's not a boar, could it be another local animal, like the fox? Maher doesn't think so.
Rather than being a howl, it's much more of a modulating kind of thing. So it didn't seem like the fox would be a likely candidate.
However, when it comes to the coyote,
we can see the sound starts at a lower pitch, goes up, and then sustains at that level. And that's similar to what we heard in the Sam Houston recording. I can't say that it's absolutely certain, but it's similar enough that I think that's a possibility.
okay, so maybe a coyote. But what about the big man himself? Maher checks for a Bigfoot match using the popular Sierra sounds.
We see a continuous sort of tone, but it's very short in duration and tends to be more of a yippy quality, where the observation in Sam Houston was more of a howl. The characteristics are different enough that they're not the same source.
Our verdict? Unknown animal noises. While we have ruled out most of the local wildlife, the coyote was similar, but not a clear match, and the Sierra sounds had a different tone. Nothing lined up well enough to make a clear call. But if you ever find yourself in the Sam Houston National Forest, like Boyd, be prepared for something strange to happen. Be prepared to record it, and be prepared to run. May 23rd, 1997, the Catskill Mountains of New York, and Doug Pridgeon is filming his friends around a fire. It's a Friday night, and they're camped out for a nearby music festival, but they are not alone.
Are we filming now?
We're filming.
Okay, over here.
In the background of the footage, a shape emerges between the trees. It appears to be a small bipedal creature that proceeds to climb and swing from the branches. Look again, especially at that swinging motion.
This is not a dude in a suit. There's no way a person could imitate that kind of motion up in a tree. Most of those branches probably couldn't even support an adult human male's weight. It has to be an ape of some sort. I think that is a Sasquatch doing baby Sasquatch stuff up in a tree.
While reported sightings of young Sasquatch-like primates are rare, they do exist, including one story from British Columbia that dates all the way back to the 1800s.
The story goes that on the Trans-Canadian Railroad, the railroad workers saw a juvenile Sasquatch, even though they didn't call it that because the word didn't exist yet. They hit it with a rock, knocked it out, and basically captured it. People came and looked at it. A couple newspaper accounts depict how big it was, how tall it was. It wouldn't eat this, it would eat that, and then it disappears. Some people think that they are gonna ship it back to the UK and it died in transit and they threw it overboard. Dr. Grover Krantz suggested that perhaps P.T. Barnum bought it because it was around that time that Jojo the Dog-Faced Boy became part of the traveling circus for P.T. Barnum.
Barrickman also believes that if you look closely, you can actually see a potential mama Sasquatch in this footage.
Right there. Look at that. It's moving, it just moved back that direction. One of the most common misconceptions about Bigfoot is that it is an individual, but it's not true. They clearly reproduce, as any normal animal would. And right here, this is the proof of that. We have a larger one down below and a juvenile up in a tree.
Many Sasquatch researchers believe the reason juvenile Bigfoot sightings are so rarely documented may be the same reason you've probably never seen a baby pigeon or a baby squirrel. The mothers of these animals secretly protect their young offspring in secluded nests or shelters until the moment they are big and strong enough to reveal themselves to the outside world. Let's see if this potential baby Bigfoot is ready to reveal himself to our experts. Some question if this could possibly be a human child swinging on these branches.
The problem is humans, for all their agility, don't have the capability to cavort around amongst the branches of a tree as the individual that I witnessed in this film. That points to at least the infant being something other than human.
So, if it's not human, what about a small bear? Infant bears are known to climb trees, but Meldrum says this creature's anatomy is much closer to an ape's.
Its limb proportions aren't that different from a small chimpanzee. Either what we're looking at is something like a chimpanzee infant, or it is a young Sasquatch.
Private investigator Steve Culls was one of the first people to investigate this mysterious video.
We had to confirm, and we did with the property owner, that they did not allow any animals whatsoever on the property because of insurance purposes. I did make calls around to see if there was any escapes from zoos or medical laboratories, and there weren't.
We checked with wildlife biologist Stephanie Manka to see if she could shed any light on this potential primate.
So based on primate behavior, I would expect the young to be closer to the adult because primates, they tend to have fewer young, and the young tend to stay around the mother for a long period of time. I wouldn't expect it to be so far away from the mother in the trees. And I highly doubt that a mother with its young would bring it so close to people at an event like a music festival where there is a lot of noise and a lot of people there.
In fact, it is this behavior that makes Manka disagree with Meldrum on the potential identity of these creatures.
With bears, they love to scavenge on human foods. And in fact, a festival like this could even attract bears because they could realize that there's a lot of free food around for them to scavenge. Black bears can easily climb trees, and often moms will encourage their cubs to go up trees to protect them from predators. I think it's most likely a bear cub that's swinging in these branches and not a primate.
Our verdict? Unidentified animal. Manka thinks the creature's behavior says bear cub, while Meldrum thinks its limb proportions mean primate. Seems like the only thing our experts can agree on is that whatever this thing is, it certainly isn't human.